Hello there, dear listener. We hope you're enjoying this lovely discussion. If you're not already aware, this show is part of a podcast network called KWAZ Radio. A Pan-African Nationalist and Garveyite network comes to showcasing the rich and varied thoughts of African people. We have an exciting lineup of shows that we think you'll enjoy, including
the Victor Medicine Podcast.
I think black people require too much buy-in. Like, you constantly have to sell black people on things that are beneficial to black people.
The Pro-Black Perspective Podcast.
I'm fearful that our people are not really studying how to get ahead, and we're kind of, continually staying behind.
The Harsh Reality Podcast.
It don't matter. I think people are so dumbed down, it wouldn't matter what you reveal to them. They still are in the matrix. They're in the simulation. They're going to keep doing what they did at lemmings. So it really don't matter.
The Learning Curve Podcast.
Sexual access has never given you economic empowerment. The only person who has ever been economically empowered by a sexual relationship is the wasp and his woman.
The Cassandra Cheek Show.
When we start rising up to fight for our own, I guarantee you they'll stop doing what they're doing. I guarantee you they would have let that brother go. They was waiting to see what black folks was going to do.
Brother Bakari Podcast.
Black people love to claim folks that hate them, right? They are slave masters, and they are ashamed of who they really are.
The Forecast Radio.
Like, if you pray to the same deity as, like, your enemy, and that God blesses your enemy more than you may want to reconsider who you pray to,
And Tanzan, African Mind.
Because generally, a welcoming of everyone. Sometimes, to my consternation, I think that they should be less, welcoming.
If you love our podcast network, we would be grateful if you could rate and review us on Apple Podcasts. Follow us on social media, like and subscribe to our YouTube channel, and check out our website at www.kwazradio.com for more information. Thank you for tuning in. And now, back to the program.
Htp family. I see some people are already in the building. We have Matron, Ashe the Matron. How you doing, Matron? Nice to see you. Kofi's here. Kofi hasn't been here in a minute, so shout out to Kofi. It's good to see everybody. So we got some people. We got some likes. Let's get them likes up. Like other people say, like, subscribe, share, that kind of stuff. Let people know what's happening. I might do some stuff during the week because I realize some people don't want to hear a book from, a book from 60 years ago or whatever, right? I'm not going to do the math. I think it's 60. I don't know. Actually, 50? Yeah, 50 years. So I guess I did the math. But I know some people don't want to hear that. So if you guys think of something you want me to do, let me know. My brother Kamjiverse, I don't know if you guys know about Kamjiverse. Kamjiverse says he wants to do a podcast with me. So if you guys can think of a topic me and Kamjiverse can have, let me know. We actually got some history, so it's pretty cool. Other than that, yeah, we're gonna jump into it. This chapter is really big. I'll show you guys. It says it's like 80 pages, 90 pages. So I don't think we could do half. I don't even think we could do a quarter, honestly. I think we could do a quarter at most. Maybe a third, like 30 pages. Yeah, let's do 30 pages so that we don't have to thing. But we'll probably just like stop at the next chapter. We'll see how the partitions work. Other than that, but like maybe 30 pages at most so that we can, like, we'll see. Like, we'll see, not at most, but we'll see if there's any close stop in the 30-page range, so that we can, like, we can just get things done. Because, you don't want to have too many podcasts on a series, even though you don't really like long episodes. But here's the thing about long episodes. That's what people know. You can do other things. I can't do other things. You can do other things. You can put this on, go to the gym. You can put this on, do some push-ups. You could put this on, get some cooking done. You know what I mean? I'm speaking loud enough that you can hear me over whatever you're doing. Go take a walk somewhere and do that kind of stuff. So that's another thing. So anyway, Africa's contributions to capitalist development of Europe, the colonial period. And look, this reminds me of this image. There's this. I want people to understand. I wrote a story a long time ago about. I think it's in the Pro-Black Opinion. I wrote a story about. You can't be the farm animal and think you develop the farm. You can't be the farm animal and think you're contributing to the farm. There's a video that's circulated now of this woman in South Africa, right? Where she sees a bunch of chickens, but she calls a bunch of chickens over, and then she grabs one by the leg and cooks it and eats it. These chickens are sitting around discussing, we built this farm. No, you didn't. You're the chicken. You're the livestock. And I understand the like you are the animal that this animal is using. We talk about chattel slavery. Chattel slavery reduces us to animals. You are an animal. The only difference is that when other people had slavery, they treated you with certain dignity. These people don't even treat you with dignity. They say, you know what? This is an advanced primate. That's what they look at you as. And I mean, I'm. It's getting to the point where I don't even I'm not even gonna say it. I'm not even gonna say it. What's up, fam? Somebody else say it. Somebody else say it. I'm not gonna say it, but somebody else say it. Somebody else say it. Let's just keep going. I'm gonna listen to this in the future and be like, what was I gonna say? Everyone's like, I don't know what you're gonna say. The colonies have been created for the metropole by the metropole French. The colonies have been created for the metropole by the metropole French, saying, what? Anyway, sales operations in the United States and management of the 14 Unilever plants are directed from Lever House on New York's fashionable Park Avenue. You look at this tall, striking glass and steel structure and you wonder how many hours of underpaid black labor and how many thousands of tons of underpriced palm oil and peanuts and cocoa it costs to build it. Yeah. But like that's the whole point. I want you guys to fam, look, y'all gonna do me a favor. I'm gonna actually show you guys. I'm not gonna show it, I'm gonna put it in the chat. Okay? This is the first sentence. I'm trying to get people to... I'm going to encourage nationalism. Right? This is the first sentence for this chapter. And I don't know how to follow it. I don't know how to follow it up. I don't know how to follow this up. But this is the reality of the world. Okay? While that music was playing just now, I decided, look, let me try to put this in. Because it makes a little sense. But because in my mind, I'm thinking this reading is going to help me write this chapter. Okay? The next sentence. Now, I don't know how to follow this sentence. I just wrote this during that ad while I was listening. Okay? Now, I'll read these sentences for those of you at home who are like, look, I'm jogging right now. I'm not going to pick up my phone. Or I'm lifting up weights. I don't want to touch my phone right now. Right? Appreciate you guys. Get your reps in. In any territory, there are two classes. The overclass and the underclass. The rulers and the ruled. The elites and the commoners. The nation and the population. That's the first sentence that I want to start with. How I follow it up, I don't know. But this is what I wrote so far. This is not a choice. The choice is whether to be a populationist or a nationalist. Populationism is a farce. I don't like that, obviously. I just wrote it. I wish you regret sending it to you guys. I might just delete it, but I can't because I just said it. Either way, the first sentence is where it's at. There are two classes, and I think the second sentence is not a choice. Is okay too. It's not a choice. Anywhere you go, there are two classes. And you happen to be around the world, for the most part, with exceptions, obviously, in Africa. Or, in Africa and the Caribbean, but with exceptions. And not just Africa and Caribbean. Actually, no. Just Africa and Caribbean. I mean, obviously, you could, acquire some, prestige in the West. But at the end of the day, who's the fucking elites in the West? Right? Anyway, but what I'm saying is this. You're in a territory. There's two classes. And the trouble is that, and so when we look at this paragraph before, right? When we look at this paragraph, the reason why I brought this up, when you look at this paragraph, you realize this underpaid black labor, that's the underclass. That's the underclass. The directed from Leverhouse, that's the overclass. Oh my gosh, I'm so... See, the reason why I'm sharing this and the reason why I'm so excited to share this stuff is because I'm telling you, one is the truth. It's the truth. And we kind of hide away from the truth. Okay? Two, it's like, because it's the truth, it was so hard to get to it. Let me, oh my gosh, what is it? Gentlemen, how do you find this thing? So I'm looking at my page. I'm going to show you guys. I'm looking at my page. And I really got to be quick because I thought I said I wanted to do 30 pages, and it looks like I'm just already distracted AF. Let me see if I can find. Let's see if I can show my browser. Nope, this is not showing. I'm gonna try to sound like one of those people online. The browser is not browsering. Anyway, so here's my website. Obviously, I was listening to Coast. That song is dope. Anyway, put my name on the coats. All right. I think actually it's probably in collected. So sometimes you want to go back to this is an important document, collected quotes and stuff. So you go to Bruce. Here, look. He says, look, gentlemen, behold the true philosophy of society. This is Count Metternich, okay? The true philosophy of society. Gentlemen in the palace, serfs in the field, and an impassable barrier between. And so John R. Bruce says, as a critique, the Count Metternichs of America today have the same thought. Now you say to yourself, who is Count Metternich? Okay? Who is Count Metternich? Okay? So here we have it. This is Count Metternich. 1773, 1859 in Germany. It has nothing to do with black people. He has nothing to do with black people. Okay? 1773, 1859 in Germany. He was at one point the Chancellor of the Austrian Empire, the Interior Minister of the Empire. He was a quote unquote noble because he was a count, right? That was too many hours, right? But that's it. This has nothing to do with black people. But what they're telling you is, look, they built their societies to separate the elites from the commoners. And of course, we say, hey, we're not those people. We don't want to do that kind of shit. That's the way we're thinking, right? If white man does it, it's not good. I get that idea. But this is the way. But it goes back to the thing I wrote. That's the way the world is. When you go to the village, there's the chief and the people who aren't chiefs. You know what they call in America? They call the chiefs and the Indians. There are the chiefs and the Indians. There's the leader and the followers. There's the village head and the village children. You understand? There's the overclass and the underclass. Everywhere you go. The human species. So you have to start looking at this like animals. Like you see the bees. You look at bees like they're animals. You say, hey, look, there's the workers. And the bees are insects. But still, you look at them and you say, there's the worker bees. There's the queen bee. Right? I think there's no fighter bees. I don't know, but I think it's just workers and queens, honestly. Or maybe some breeders, I think. Workers, breeders, and queens. Right? Whatever it is. They just form a hierarchy. In the lion kingdom, you have the lion, and then he has a harem. He has a harem. And then he gets challenged by other lions, and then they take his harem. Kill his children, take his harem. There's just a natural order to the animals. Now you think you're free will and you're free thought, but you don't realize you have hierarchies. And you have it, and you know it. You're born into one. You are born into a hierarchy. You are born with a ruler. You see my son? He has a ruler. Me. But of course, you branch out into society, and society's not going to be okay. Well, only you the ruler of your house, but that you do you set the rules in the world? No, you don't. In America, you have a ruler too, and everybody knows you have a ruler. You know, in fact, we all talk about. I don't want to say it, but we all talk about Joe Biden, don't we? We all talked about Trump, didn't we? We all talked about Obama, didn't we? We knew there was an overclass. Now, we might be, I'm doing my shit, I'm going about my life. Yeah, okay, you keep doing your shit and go about your life, but you know damn well, if you start doing whatever you want, these people are going to determine, there's a system in place to determine the consequences for your actions. And don't act like you don't know. Now, these people say impassable barrier. There's not necessarily an impassable barrier in Africa. There's not really necessarily an impassable barrier in America. Count Metternich was talking about, once upon a time. All the same, we have to understand this. But I don't want to dilly-dally too long. So let's get back into the book. And appreciate you guys for entertaining that rather vocal rant. Let's see what the comments are, though. We have Kofi says Jews just show them that they the underclass, right? Well, I don't know. I feel like the Jews show the Jews. Well, the Jews. I feel like they have some close proximity to the overclass. I'll say that. But I feel like that. Well, for black folk, yeah. Black people. Oh, black people definitely. Like, black people are definitely underclass. You know? I'm not going to say the Jews aren't underclass, generally speaking. But obviously, some of them, like, because there's even some black people who are part of the quote-unquote overclass. You know what I'm saying? Well, in a sense, or have close proximity to the overclass. I'll put it that way. But yeah, definitely. Yeah, black folk generally nobody thinks Jamie Foxx is a part of the overclass. Like, we think he's rich, but he's not a part of the overclass. He doesn't run shit. You know what I mean? Obviously. Expatriation of African surplus under colonialism. So now we're back to the reality, right? So capital and we're gonna try to do 30 pages. So let's read this quick. Colonial Africa fell within that part of the internationalist capitalist economy from which surplus was drawn to feed the metropolitan sector. As seen earlier, exploitation of land and labor is essential for human social advance, but only on the assumption that the product is made available within the area where the exploitation takes place. You see what I'm saying? Oh my gosh, I can't even... Where does this... Okay, so colonial Africa fell within that part of the internationalist capitalist economy from which surplus was drawn to feed the metropolitan sector. As seen earlier, exploitation of land and labor. So he's like, look, exploitation of land and labor is essential, but let it benefit the people around that area. What does that make sense? All right, we're probably going to do 20 pages. I'm sorry, fam. But, what is it? The trouble with the socialists, okay? The trouble of the socialists is that they don't even make sense. Where is the logic here? And say in the sense of, how do you say it? Let me do some math though. Let me see. 90 pages. Let's say divided by 4. I don't know why. Oh, actually, no, I don't know why. Okay, yeah, I could do that. All right. Anyway, but what I'm saying is this. You have to, if you have a policy, you have to be able to enforce it. Okay? Like, I could say, look, I could go all right, let's do Shaka Zulu as an example, right? There's two, I could say this. No teenagers can have sex before 18. Okay? No teenager can have sex before 18. I can say that. Will that stop any teenagers from having sex? Besides to my son, maybe, right? Will that stop any teenager from having sex? No. Shaka Zulu said, look, if you do not have victory on the battlefield, you can't have sex. And sure enough, a lot of Zulus didn't have sex until they came back and had victory on the battlefield. Because he could enforce it. It's not a matter of only the assumption the product is made available where they explain. Only assumption. Like, shut the fuck up. You don't enforce shit. You understand that I could go to like no disrespect to y'all, but let's say this. I could go to not even me. Let's not even say. All right, let's say it this way. In America, a man can walk into your house right now and take your child away from you for 10 fucking years. They can roll up in your house right now in America. They can roll up in your house, take your child from you for 15 years, and if you want to see them, charge you to call them, and if you want to see them, you have to go to where they're keeping your kid. Right? And you guys know what I'm talking about. The police. You understand? They can say, look, your kid is misbehaving, we're taking him from you. And we're going to put him over here. And you can't do shit. Or you could try to do shit. And you're gonna be bleeding out the side of your mouth. Okay? Like, nobody cares about what you think. Nobody cares. Like, I write this book, nobody cares. I know this. The only one that's gonna care is gonna be the people, who I might be in a relationship with. Probably. Or people who are interested in scholarly things, but I can't enforce anything in my literature. And I know this. I don't have delusions of dictatorship. Delusions of overwhelming power. Now, obviously, if I become a leader or an elite or something, like, yeah, I can enforce shit. But before that, I can't enforce nothing. So, only the assumption. I mean, I know I shouldn't be that pissed off by one sentence, but, like, it's just like we are weakening ourselves by deluding ourselves. We're weakening ourselves by deluding ourselves. But anyway, we'll continue. Let's go back to the reading. I was looking at the comments. So colonialism was not merely a system of exploitation, but one whose essential purpose was to repatriate the profits to the so-called mother country. Yeah, you're supposed to. You're supposed to want the profits. From an African viewpoint, that amounted to consistent expatriation of surplus produce by African labor out of African resources. It means development of Europe as part of the same dialectical process in which Africa was underdeveloped. By any standards, labor was cheap in Africa. The amount of surplus extracted from the African labor was great. And the employer under colonialism paid an extremely small wage, a wage usually insufficient to keep the workers physically alive, and therefore he had to grow food to survive. This applied in particular to farm labor of the plantation type, to work in mines, and to certain forms of urban employment. At the time of the imposition of European colonial rule, Africans were able to gain a livelihood from the land. Many retained some contact with the land in the years ahead, and they worked from their shambas, farms, in order to pay taxes or because they were forced to do so. You see me? Y'all see me? It didn't even say farms. I just said it. Well, therefore, they were forced to do so. After feudalism is Swahili. Swahili for farm. All right. After, I don't think you would say shambas. I think you'll probably, like washamba or something. I don't know. Or maybe just shamba. Anyway, after feudalism in Europe had ended, the worker had absolutely no means of subsistence other than the sale of his labor to capitalists. Therefore, to some extent, the employer was responsible for ensuring the physical survival of the workers by giving him a living wage. In Africa, this was not the case. Europeans offered the lowest possible wage and relied on legislation backed by force to do the rest. There were several reasons why the African workers were more crudely exploited than his European counterpart in the present century. Firstly, the alien colonial state had a monopoly of political power, after crushing all opposition by armed force. Secondly, the African working class was small, very dispersed, and very unstable owing to migratory practices. Thirdly, while capitalism was willing to exploit all workers everywhere, European capitalists in Africa had additional racial justification for dealing unjustly with the African worker. Unjustly, okay. The racist theory that the black man is inferior led to the conclusion that he deserved lower wages, and interestingly enough, the light-skinned Arab and Berber populations of North Africa were treated as blacks by the white racist French. The combination of the above factors in turn made it extremely difficult for African workers to organize themselves. It is only the organization and resoluteness of the working class which protects it from the natural tendency of the capitalists to exploit it to the utmost. This is why in all colonial territories, when African workers realized the necessity for trade union solidarity, numerous obstacles were laid in their path by the colonial regimes. Okay, whatever. Let's just go through them. wages paid to workers in Europe and North America were much higher than. So again, oh yeah, this is the thing I wanted to point out. So one of the reasons why the wage is higher in Europe and America is the demand is higher. You know what I mean? The demand is higher. Like basically, it's like this. It's like we actually saw this in real time. There was this brother who was complaining that he was a passport bro, so he was complaining that he went to Africa, and the women were charging more than they usually charge. You know what I mean? No, he didn't go to Africa. Sorry, he went to like Latin America, and the women were charging more than they charged because more brothers were going there for the opportunity to be with women, right? Simple. Wages increase as demands increase. And what happens is that if you deprive a lot of people of their living standards, right? Yeah, you could pay them less. Now, obviously, I'm not going to say that racism didn't play a role, but of course, racism is going to play a role. You know, racism is supposed to play a role. The only people who do not understand racism happen to be black people. You know, I don't like the only realistically the only people who do not understand the need to be racist are black people. In fact, that's another passage in my latest book, honestly, and that's the thing that's gonna get me canceled, obviously. But it's like, I think let me see if I can find it. But like, it's like you have to be racist. You understand? Like if it's imperative for you. You know? I think I wrote it here, yeah. Racism is the only protection against genetic extinction. And this was known by the Eurasians and Africans and even ancient times, okay? Even ancient people understood, hey, you know what protects you against genetic extinction? Racism. But we don't understand it. Kofi says, I don't like them saying I don't like hearing them say they were treated as blacks. Most times they were not. You talking about the Jews? The thing about that's the thing though. The trouble is this. The trouble is that it looks like black people in America, let's say, adopted the Jews' arguments. You get what I'm saying? Like the Jews and the black people kind of work together, but also it seemed like because the thing you're gonna pick up on is that like the word racism actually relates to the treatment of the Jews. Like originally it related to the treatment of the Jews, right? And not just that, you have like ghettos was where the Jews lived in Germany, type thing, or where the Jews lived. You know, so it's almost like black people did it. I'll show you guys what I'm talking about. I'll show you because it's one of those things where it's like we kind of like we just forgot the history. So look, this is like the ghetto. So the term was originally used for the Venetian ghetto in Venice, Italy, to describe the part of the city where Jewish people were restricted to live and thus segregated from others. You get what I'm saying? So now black people are like, yo, we're part of the ghetto culture. And then we're like, yo, why are these Jews trying to identify with us? And it's like, I don't know who introduced the term ghetto to black people, because it could have just been the Jews, obviously. But there's a certain context. I don't know if racism. I didn't see anything about. I didn't look at this page yet, obviously. But let me see. But I think also, yeah, racism. So it says, look, one of the main influences were this, blah, 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 blah. So the Pan-German League, created in 1891, promoted German imperialism and racial hygiene as opposed to intermarriage with Jews, so on and so forth. But long story short, like, we kind of adapted the racism, like the racists, like, oh man, we're the victims of racism. And like, it got to the point where Americans, because that's the thing about Americans are not that smart in a sense. So you can see like there's a lot of stuff about Jews, but the Americans are not that smart. So what happens is that the Americans, so let's see, I think this is one of them. It says theory, the typology of race, the Aryan and social, so on and so forth. So the Americans kind of don't have a broad historical context. And I'm not saying that the Jews do, but probably related to this, they probably are a little more informed in terms of like German racism in a sense. Um, but I'm saying this to say that yeah, like Whitney Houston, not Whitney Houston, uh, I forgot her name, but the black woman with locks, I guess. Will I don't know her name. I think it's like a W. But I think she married a Jew. But she was like, "Hey, the Jews don't even face racism because they're not a different race." And it's like, okay, so you took their terms. You get what I'm saying? Like you took the terms related to their plight in a sense, or like the ghetto related to their plight, and then you kind of took it over, and then now you're like, "Hey, this doesn't even apply to you." And it's like, well, actually, it originally applied to them, but like you know what I'm saying. So it's like I get what you're saying. I don't think obviously I don't think they've had a chattel slavery experience, like we have, or like I don't think that, and I don't think that. Yeah, I mean there's a lot to it. You probably shouldn't say too much, but at the same time it's like I could see the historical context for what they're talking about. Like it's not completely out of the like I don't think it's completely bizarre for them to be like, oh yeah, racism applies to us. Oh, sorry, you said not Jews. Not Jews. The reference that was made in the book about Arabs and such. The Arabs were treated as blacks. Yeah, I don't know why black people say that, but like again, like I think everybody like I think racism is what you're supposed to be doing. You get what I'm saying? Like it doesn't make any sense if you're trying to survive as a genetic species, right? You're supposed to like you understand like the way the Germans went to Africa and they like slaughtered a whole heap of people, you know, or like when the British were doing these concentration camps in Kenya, like these are real like these people are really on a genocidal mission, and if you don't understand that they are on a genocidal mission, or that they can commit genocide against you, then you're not paying attention. Like that's another thing that I was going to put in this book where it's like, look, these people were genocidal. Granted, they might look like they're less genocidal today, but they have quite a few genocidal capabilities. And I think I list three. Let me see if I could. I don't want to keep going into my book because, obviously. But the first one is obviously stockpiling nuclear weapons. The second one is global warming. Oh, and I think the third one is just just regular, straight up, ethnic, economic warfare type thing, right? But like all of these are genocidal tactics. Oh, but not tactics, but like the nuclear warfare is gonna be like genocide. You understand? Like possibly of the human species. Global warming is another genocide, possibly of the human species, as we know it. The other one with the United Nations and them, that's like it doesn't have to be genocide per se, but yeah, like it's serious thing. So I mean, like I'm not gonna say they face the same bad as us, but like it doesn't even matter. Like at the end of the day, what we have to do is inform ourselves on how do we stop these people. Because I'm gonna give a little bit of the praise to the Chinese or the Asians in the sense of they're saying, look, we're not trying to fucking lose again. We're trying to lead the loser Olympics, and the rest everybody else is trying to win the Olympics. We're trying to get the least amount of medals, and they're trying to get the most, and that's the problem. Like, oh man, I got less medals than you, Mr. Arab. Like, no, I mean, who gives a shit? How many medals are you gonna have? Because, these people can turn on you quick. I'll just leave it at that. Or humans in general can just turn on you quick. Like it's not even just white folk. Obviously, like you saw the a lot of misbehavior by black folk, but that happens in an instant, and like it's not as wicked as whites, obviously, But like, the whites can do that too. Like, they could be nice, they can smile on your face, and then they can just turn on you. And if you have no defense, it goes back to that quote that, you know, some brother said, somebody else said, but but you know, the record is that I said it. But anyway, the quote is, you know, we're the only people that's protected by the goodwill of our enemies. Like, we're the only people who seek to be protected by the goodwill of our enemies. I'll leave it at that. Anyway, so let's go back to the reading. Yeah, I got like nobody watching. No, I'm joking. It's like 3 people. That's good though. But I think it's because I keep stopping. When workers realized the necessity of trade union solidarity, numerous obstacles were laid in their path by the colonial regimes. Wages paid to workers in Europe and North America were much higher than wages paid to African workers in comparable categories. The Nigerian coal miner at Enugu earned 1 per day for working underground and 9 per day for jobs on the surface. Such a miserable wage would be beyond comprehension of a Scottish or German coal miner who could virtually earn in an hour what the Enugu miner would paid for a 6-day week. The same disparity existed with port workers. The records of the and again, remember that, I'll say this, the capitalist pays you enough for you to come back the next day. Okay? If he pays you 6 days labor in 1 hour, right? After 6 days, you're not going to come back for another week, for another month. Okay? Because let's say this. So he says in an hour, so you work 8 hours. That means that you would work the equivalent of 42 days, like an equivalent of a month in 1 day. Right? Sorry, did I say 42, 48? But like what I'm saying is that if he's paying you 48 days salary in a sense, right? In 1 day. Right? So over a month, are you gonna show up to work the next day? Now you might be like, okay, sure, I'll show up for a week. Okay, that's fine. Now you show up for a week, you have a year's worth of money in your savings. Are you going to still go into this dangerous ass mine? No. Why would you go in the mine? Now, unless you're like suicidal, why would you go in the mine? You're working to eat. You're working to get paid. You know. So yeah. Of course, this white boy is gonna do this. I mean, and it's not just. And he does it to the miner in a thing, because the miner who's getting paid, you know, the 6 day, you know, whatever, he has to go to work tomorrow too. He just has more expensive shit. And I'm not defending the guy. I don't know him. I don't know if they're real, but like, you know, they're not even alive, right? But what I'm saying is that that's what we have to understand about economics. And you know, if you don't, I mean, I did mention this. I shared this in Zubiri. So if you guys check out Zubiri, you know, you'll know that I pointed out that, you know, because I heard this white boy say this a long time ago, and I was like, that's deep. Anyway, so the same disparity existed with port workers. The records of the large American shipping company, Faro Lines, shows that in 1955, of the total amount spent on loading and discharging cargo moving between Africa and America, 5/6 went to American workers and 1/6 to Africans. Yet it was the same amount of cargo loaded and loaded on both ends. The wages paid to the American stevedore or the European coal miners were still such as to ensure the capitalists made a profit. The point here is merely to illustrate how much greater was the rate of exploitation of African workers. When discrepancies such as the above were pointed out during the colonial period and subsequently, those who justified colonialism were quick to reply that standard and cost of living was higher in capitalist countries. And they are. The fact is the higher standard was made possible by the exploitation of colonies, and there was no justification for keeping African living standards so depressed in an age where better was possible, and in a situation where a higher standard was possible because of the work output of Africa themselves. The kind of living standards supportable by African labor within the continent is readily illustrated by the salaries and lifestyles of the whites inside Africa. So again, you know, the fact is that the higher standard, there was no justification. They're not your family. They're not your friends. They are there to exploit you. Yes, that's what that's what they're there for. Like, I don't even understand. Is the volume low? I can't tell. Hold on a second. Let me see. Like, I don't understand. White people are there to exploit you. Let me see. Let me try to listen to this. Like, and it's not even just white people. I'm just telling you, generally speaking, people are going to, like, the whole objective of putting somebody to work is to exploit them. You know, like literally. I don't even know how else to say it, really. Let me see how I could click on this link. Let me see if I could click on this link. I'm just gonna try to play this link for myself. Like, I don't know how else to say it. The whole objective of business is, you know, like. No, that's not as what. The whole business of is to exploit other people. Let me see. Wait, it sounds low. Yeah, it sounds low on my phone, but it doesn't sound low online. I could try to turn it up. Like, it doesn't sound low on my computer. I mean, on the. I'll just try to turn it up. Let me see if I could turn it up. But, like, I think we have to just come to terms with this idea that actually you're supposed to be exploiting other people. You know, maybe I should even put that in the class, because it's like, we don't like the word exploit, but like, it's kind of like how the guy said, you're exploiting the land. You know, you're exploiting the land, or you're exploiting the thing. Like, I don't like that word, but at the same time, I have to be honest. You know, I don't like the word, but I have to be honest. Let's see if I could turn it up. Let's see. So it's on 0 decibels right now. Let's see if 2 decibels is better. Is that better? I can't tell. But yeah. You have to exploit the other person. And that's the whole thing. It's like, you could say it's mutual exploitation to make it sound better. But the reality is this. I open up a restaurant. The objective is that I can get more from them than I give them. But yeah. You have to exploit them. You know, the idea is that I can get more from them than I give them. And that is, in some terms, exploitation. You know? Let me see if this volume is higher. The objective is that I can get more from them. I can't tell. Than I give them. All right, it's not seeming to be working, but yeah, I mean, I think we just have to come to terms with that. Let me see what the comments are before I continue. Volume is good for me. Bennett says maybe it's him. All right, but like, that's it. And I mean, it's not the best word. You know, it's not the best word. I don't want to say exploiters and exploited. It's not the best word, but it's a reality. Oh, by the way, yeah, shout out to Cassandra Cheeks. Shout out to Bit of Medicine. They came through. Cassandra Cheeks says Jumbo. But anyway, let's just keep going. The kind of living standard supportable by African labor within the continent is readily illustrated. So he says, colonial governments discriminated against the employment of Africans in senior categories, and whenever it happened that a white and a black filled the same spot, the white man was sure to be paid considerably more. This was true at all levels, ranging from civil service posts to mine workers. African salaried workers in the British colonies of the Gold Coast and Nigeria were better off than their brothers in many other parts of the continent, but they were restricted to the junior staff level in the civil service. In the period, because it's not your country, it's not your colony. In the period before the last World War, that's why I like this coup. I like the coup. I like when black people take upon themselves to do their own self-determination. But as long as you're sitting under this white boy, right? Understand you're gonna be under this white boy. You know, if I go into this white man's house at any point, I understand I'm his guest. You understand? I understand that I'm his guest. And, you know, I could be like, you know what? I'm a tough man. I can do whatever Sure. Right? But then he probably has a contingency for that. He has a contingency plan for that. Right? In the period before the last World War, European civil servants in the Gold Coast received an average of 40 pounds a month with quarters and other privileges. Africans got an average of salary of 4. There were instances where one European in the establishment earned as much as his 25 African assistants put together. Outside the civil service, Africans obtained work in building projects, in mines, and in all domestics, all low-paying jobs. It was exploitation without responsibility, without redress. In 1934, 41 Africans were killed in a gold mine disaster in the Gold Coast, and the capitalist company offered only $3 to their dependents, £3 for the dependents of each of these men as compensation. And again, it's like, well, what are you going to do about it? What are you going to do about it? You know, what are you going to do? Oh man, these guys didn't pay me as much as I deserve for the loss of my loved one. Okay, what are you going to do? You're gonna be free? Then go be free. Be free. But if you're letting somebody else make decisions for you, they're not gonna necessarily make the decisions for you. You understand? If you're making other people make the decisions for you, they're probably not going to make the decisions that are right for you. You know what I mean? Like if I'm with a woman and she don't have any money and I have money, she might need money to do her hair. She might not get that money. Because I'm going to say, you know what, I like natural hair. You know what I'm saying? If I'm cheap, she might say, look, I need to get my nails done every day. She going to get her nails done every month or every year, maybe. You know what I'm saying? Shit, I don't even look at women. I don't even know about no manicures. I ain't going to hold you. But anyway, where European settlers were found in considerable numbers, the wage differential was readily perceived. In North Africa, the wages of Moroccans and Algerians were from 16 to 25% those of Europeans. In East Africa, the position was much worse, notably in Kenya and Tanganyika. Comparison with white settlers' earnings and standards bring up a sharp contrast how incredibly low-wage African wages were. While Lord Delamere controlled 100,000 acres of Kenya's land, the Kenyans had to carry a kipande pass in his own country to beg for a wage of 15 to 20 per month. The absolute limit of brutal exploitation was found in the southern parts of the continent and in southern Rhodesia. For example, agricultural laborers rarely received more than 15 per month. Workers in mines got a little more if they were semi-skilled, but they also had more intolerable working conditions. Unskilled laborers in the mines of northern Rhodesia often got as little as 7 per month. A lorry driver on the famous Copper Belt was in semi-grade skill grade. In one mine, Europeans performed that job for £30 per month, while in another, Africans did it for £3 per month. In all colonial territories, wages were reduced during the period of crisis which shook the capitalist world during the 1930s, and they were not restored or increased until after the last capitalist world war. In southern Rhodesia in 1949, Africans employed in municipal areas were awarded minimum wages from 35 to 75 per month. That was a considerable improvement over previous years, but white workers on the job for 8 hours per day compared to the Africans 10 or 14 hours received a minimum of 20 per day plus free quarters, etc. Per day. Woo, per day. Damn. So that's a lot. Anyway, but of course, white people are gonna pay their own people more. If a black person was paying black people more, I'd love it. So I can't complain. Bit of Medicine says, no loom seems louder now. Oh, volume seems louder now. Yeah, I think I turned it up. I don't know if it worked or not, but I think I turned it up. I mean, you said it worked, so yeah. The Rhodesians offered a miniature version of South Africa's apartheid system, which oppressed the largest industrial working class on the continent. In the Union of South Africa, African laborers worked deep underground under inhuman conditions which would not have been tolerated by miners in Europe. Consequently, black South Africans. So it's like what are you going to do about it? And I mean, look, on the one hand, I appreciate it because it's like, this is good information. You know? At least for 70 years ago or whatever, right? This is good information. I mean, I don't know when he's recording this. I mean, he's obviously 50 years from now, or 50 years ago, but I don't know what year he's talking about. Either way, you can't make it seem like the thing is that it's partly the victim mentality, but it's also like, well, yeah, you're the victim. Like, what do you expect? Like, unless you think the world should not be racist, what's the problem with encountering racism? You understand? Like, it's different if you're like, hey, you know what? I think the world shouldn't be racist. Okay, that's good. If you think the world should not be racist, then that makes a little sense. But if you understand that the world is racist, then what's the problem? What's the problem? So consequently, black South African workers recovered gold from deposits which elsewhere would be regarded as non-commercial. And yet in the white section of the working class, which received whatever benefits were available in terms of wages and salaries, officials had admitted that the mining companies could pay white hires than miners in any other part of the world because of the super profits made by paying black workers a mere pittance. As is well known, those conditions still operate. However, this chapter presents matters in the past tense to picture the colonial epoch. In a final analysis, the shareholders of the mining companies were the ones who benefited most of all. They remained in Europe, and of course, like, who do you expect to benefit the most? Like I said, so I told you guys, I buy a restaurant in Tanzania, right? The restaurant is not making a super profit, right? You're paying everybody. You're paying all these workers decent wages for them to work in this business, whether or not there's any profit. Okay? The restaurant, let's say, I'll put it this way. Let's say it started off as, let's say that because I think I did a Google Sheets, right? It starts off, I don't want to put a number, so let's just make up some numbers, okay? Let's make up a number, so let's say it starts off at 10 million shillings, which is a lot of money. So it's not really how much money I put into it, but I just want to say, let's just do that example. I don't want to say it's not how much money I put in it. All right, let's just do it simple. Let's just do it simple. I don't know how to say it without saying it. All right, let's just do 10 million to just make it simple, right? It starts off at 10 million shillings, okay? Within the first month, it only makes 2 million shillings from me. Oh, not even me per se, but let's say the owner. But it makes 2 million shillings. Or I guess I'm the owner, so whatever. 2 million shillings, right? For me. For the workers, it makes, let's say each of the workers gets, let's say 500,000 shillings each for the month, which is good money in Tanzania. Okay? How much profit did I make? So, I said 2 million goes aside for me, right? It cost me 10 million though. So how much profit did I make? And how much profit did the workers make? Now you're saying, hey, look, the workers don't get as much as I do. Because I got 2 million, they got 500,000. They're doing the work, I'm not doing the work. But who actually got profit? You understand? So the shareholders of the mining company, who bought the mine? Now, granted, these are a bunch of, foreign exploiters, so it wasn't just simple buying. There was a lot of, killing and shit involved. But I'm just pointing out, generally speaking, the people who are supposed to benefit the most are the people who've given the biggest investment. Because everybody else is making a profit before they do. And you might say, well, they like what happened with this restaurant is, let's say I earned 2 million. Power went out in the city. So all my earnings stop. Now the workers who get their 500,000, their earning stops too. Okay? But, like I said, they have a profit. I don't. The restaurant has to generate more than 10 million for me to start seeing any profit. And then sure, after I see the profit, then obviously you'll say, oh man, Oni, you're not even working. But you have to understand how much I had put in and how much I had to direct and how much I had to do in order for me to even get that profit. Because reality is the business could stop and then I get nothing. It's a big risk for me. And it's not a risk for the workers. I'll leave it at that. Let's see. Mr. IC3 Black is here. Reparations Nation says, greeting. Yes, problems. What is the solution? Exactly. What is the solution? All right, so let's go. They remained in Europe and North America and collected fabulous dividends every year from the gold, diamond, manganese, uranium, which was brought out of the South African subsoil by African labor. For years, the capitalist press itself praised South Africa as an investment outlet, returning super profits on capital investment. From the very beginning of the scramble for Africa, huge fortunes were made from gold and diamond in southern Africa by people like Cecil Rhodes and even your boy Elon Musk, or his father. In the present century, both the investments and outflow of surplus have increased. Investment was mostly concentrated in mining and finance where the profits were greater. In the mid-1950s, British investments in South Africa were estimated at $860 million, and yield a stable profit of 15%, or $129 million every year. But you see that? The investments are at 860 million pounds, but they're getting 129 million pounds a year. So if you invest 860 million and you're only getting 129 million, are you making any profit? You'd have to, I don't know, I'm not going to do the math, but you'll have to, I always say I'm not going to do the math and I do it, but I don't want to. All right, so let's say you have to do 5 years of this work, 5 years of managing in order to see a profit. You understand? You say a stable profit of 50%. It's not a stable profit it's not a profit yet. Until after 5 years of dedicating your human life and your time to an investment in another country. And I'm not trying to say that these people are good at all. I'm just trying to clarify, yes, if you go to another country, you're supposed to, or if you're going to another country, if you're in any area, you're supposed to exploit labor. Okay? And if you don't exploit labor, what's the point of investing? Like how much should this profit be to where this person, this socialist, would be satisfied? You know? He says, hey, look, they invested 860 million and they received a profit of 5% or 40 million. Then he'd be satisfied? Or he'll still say, well, they still got 40 million. So he'll say he'll be satisfied when they invest 860 million and they get zero profit. But it's like, why would somebody invest 860? Because even me right now, like I told you guys, I bought this farm. I bought a Shambo. No damn profit. None. Cost me more than the fucking restaurant. No profit. And the person on the other side is like, hey, business comes at a loss. You sometimes lose, you sometimes win. Hard-earned money, gone. And I mean, to some people that's good. Well, you weren't even working on the farm anyway. Yeah, but I could have just had that fucking money though. I mean, look, I'm okay with not investing in people if it means I could get my money. But the idea of, I'm going to invest and not get any money, nah, I'm not with it. Not even going to hold you. And I don't know anybody who would be. But if you think the white boy is going to be that way, well, then you could keep thinking that. But he's already made it clear to you. He's not thinking that. De Beers Consolidated Minds made and this is the one that Lupita was advertising for. De Beers Consolidated Mind made a profit that was both phenomenal and consistently high, between $26 million and $29 million throughout the 1950s. So, and again, what was their investment though, right? It's like when you go to the movies, and you say, oh, this movie raked in $800 million. It's like, well, how much did the movie cost to make? Now, in movies, you could expect a good flip of money, right? But some movies fail. Like, I think Sankofa was a good movie. It was a good movie, and it did not. It was a box office flop. Let me actually see Sankofa. I'm doing the wrong thing. Actually, no, it doesn't matter. You guys get what I'm saying. The complex of southern African mining concerns operated not just in South Africa itself, but also in Southwest Africa, Angola, Mozambique, Northern Rhodesia, Southern Rhodesia, and the Congo. Congo was consistently a source of immense wealth for Europe because from the time of colonization until 1906, King Leopold of Belgium made at least $20 million from rubber and ivory. The period of mineral exploitation started quite early and then gained momentum, and after political control passed from Leopold to the Belgian state in 1908, total foreign capital inflow into the Congo between 1887 and 1953 was estimated by the Belgians to have been 5 billion, 5 billion, 5.7 billion pounds. The value of the outflow in the same period was said to have been 4.3 billion, exclusive of profits retained within the Congo. As is true everywhere else on the continent, the expatriation of surplus from Congo increased as the colonial period wore on. In the 5 years preceding independence, the net outflow of capital from Congo to Belgium reached massive proportions. Most of the expatriation of surplus were handled by a major European finance monopoly, the Société Générale. Société Générale has its most important subsidiary, the Union Minière de Haute-Katanga. So this is actually the people who were behind the assassination of Patrice Lumumba, which has monopolized Congolese copper production since 1889, when it was known as Compagnie de Katanga. Union Minière has been known to make profits of 27 million pounds in a single year. But like, you have to understand, and again, I hate that they killed Lumumba, but this is the thing you have to see. They're making 27 million pounds a year. Okay? 27 million pounds a year. You come along and say, look, you're not going to be able to operate in our country anymore because blah, 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 blah. You better have a fucking army. And the thing that happened with Lumumba was that he didn't have an army. It is no wonder that of the total wealth produced in Congo in any given year during the colonial period, more than 1/3 went out in the form of profits for big business and salaries for the expatriate staffs. But the comparable figures for Northern Rhodesia under the British was 1/2. In Katanga, Unimeri at least had a reputation for leaving some of the profits behind in the form of things like housing, maternity services for African workers. The Rhodesian copper belt companies expatriated profits without compunction. It should not be forgotten that outside of Southern Africa, there was also significant mining operations during the colonial period. In North Africa, foreign capital exploited natural resources of phosphates, oil, lead, zinc, manganese, and iron ore. In Guinea, Sierra Leone, and Liberia, there were important workings of gold, diamond, iron ore, and bauxite. To all that should be added the tin of Nigeria, the gold and manganese of Ghana, the gold and diamonds of Tanganyika, and the copper of Uganda and Congo Brazil. So I probably should keep this passage. I'm gonna highlight this because I think I'm gonna put in my book, the importance of like Africa's mineral resources, and but I don't know it off the top of my head. So in each case, an understanding of the situation must begin with an inquiry into the degree of exploitation of African resources and labor, and they must proceed to follow the surplus to its destination outside of Africa, into the bank accounts of the capitalists who control the majority shares in the huge multinational mining combines. And it's like, yeah, you borrow a bunch of money in order to get a mine to produce $27 million a fucking year in a single year, right? Or 27 million pounds a year, right? You get a bunch of money to do this. Of course you want to collect your 27 million pounds a year. Like, why would you not want to collect your 27 million pounds a year? Like, if I were to invest in this restaurant and then the restaurant was pulling in, let's say 2 million, all right, let's say it's pulling in 10 million shillings a year, right? After my great leadership, 10 million shillings a year. You think I don't want to pull any of that? So I'm gonna be, all right, everybody, take it back, take it. Yeah, you guys get it. Why would I do that? The thing that we complain about doesn't make sense, and it goes back to the difference between the nationalist and the populationist. It goes back because we don't seem to get, hey, yeah, people want profit for themselves. Count Metternich, if you will. And I mean, I know people don't want to hear that, but it is what it is. The African, it's not even so much what we want to hear as much as what's the reality, And if we refuse to listen to the reality, then that's fine. But it's like somebody else said. There was a quote this white people used to say was that you could fight against reality or you could deny reality, but reality still exists. Reality still exists, and you could be like, oh, that's not right. And oh man, this brother was telling me the other day, hey man, if you're helping people, don't just help beautiful women. And I don't just help beautiful women, but he's like, don't just help beautiful women, help undesirable women and help men, And it's like, no, Like, like the way how the world works is, yeah, I'm gonna help beautiful women too. You know? Like that's how the world works. It's like you're like, oh, you might seem like, yeah, okay. If I seem like that, that's fine. But that's the way the world works. You know? It's like the other one where it's like a handsome guy says, "Hey Cindy, how's your day going?" Right? And then the ugly guy says, "Hey Cindy, how's your day going?" Right? One of them sexual harassment. And the other one's playful work banter. You understand? You know, like handsome, you know, handsome. Let's say, handsome Shaka shows up and says, you know, hey Ife, what you doing later? What you doing later today? Right? Brilliant. You know, nice playful conversation. Right? And then you got, you know, ugly Alan. You know, he's like, hey Ife, what are you doing later today? Right? Don't fucking talk to me. You know, like the way the world works, it's not, you know, you might be like, that's not fair and it should be equal, you know, hold Shaka to, you know, Shaka is doing sexual harassment or Alan's not doing sex. Like, shut up. The way the world works is that, you know what, people are self-interest, okay? The African working class produced a less spectacular surplus for export. We got the companies engaged in agriculture. Agricultural plantations were widespread in North, East, and South Africa, and they also appeared in West Africa to a lesser extent. Their profit depended on an incredibly low wage and harsh working conditions imposed on African agricultural workers, and on the fact that they invested very little capital in obtaining the land, which was robbed wholesale from Africans by colonial powers and then sold to whites at nominal prices. For instance, after the Kenyan highlands had been declared crown land, the British handed over to Lord Delamere 100,000 acres of the best land at cost of penny per acre. Lord Francis Scott purchased 350,000 acres in the East African estate, got another 350,000 acres, and East African Syndicate took 100,000 acres adjoining Lord Delamere's estate, all at a giveaway prices. Needless to say, such plantations made huge profits, even if the rate was lower than in the South African gold mines or the Ingil and Daniel mine. Exactly, they were colonizing you. What do you expect them to do? Hold on to the land for themselves? No, they were like, hey, look, we're a bunch of soldiers. We're not farmers. If you want to farm, come get this. But they weren't going to give it to you. You were colonized. What? During the colonial era, Liberia was supposedly independent, but to all intents and purposes, it was a colony of the USA. In 1926, the Firestone Rubber Company of the USA was able to acquire 1 million. This was the company that stopped Garveyism. Okay? Well, this is the country that stopped Garveyism, and this is the colony this is the company that stopped Garveyism. So, was able to acquire 1 million acres of forest land in Liberia at a cost of 6 cents per acre, 1% of the value of the exported rubber. Because of the demand for the strategic importance of rubber, Firestone's profits from Liberia's land and labor carried them to the 25th position among the giant companies of the USA. European, and like today we ride Firestone tires, right? European trading companies versus the African peasant. So far this section has been dealing with that part of the surplus produced by African wage earners in mines, plantations, etc. But the African wage worker under colonialism was extremely small, and the vast majority of Africans engaged in the colonial money economy were independent peasants. How then can it be said that these self-employed peasants were contributing to the expatriation of African surplus? Apologists for colonialism argue that it was a positive benefit for such farmers to have been given the opportunity to create surplus by growing or collecting produce such as cocoa, coffee, palm oil, etc. It is essential that this misrepresentation be clarified. Let me just figure out. I'm going to figure out what time it is in Tanzania real quick, just in case I'm doing my pronunciation. All right, so he says a peasant growing a cash crop or collecting produce had his labor exploited by a long chain of individuals, starting with local businessmen. Sometimes these local businessmen were European, very rarely were they Africans, and more usually they were a minority group brought in from the outside and serving as intermediaries between the white colonists and the exploited African peasants. In West Africa, the Lebanese and Syrians played this role, while in East Africa, the Indians rose to this position. Arabs were also the middleman category in Zanzibar and a few other places on the East African coast. So they brought in foreigners to do their bidding. So cash crop peasants never had any capital on their own. They existed from one crop to another, depending on good harvest and good prices. Any bad harvest or fall of prices caused the peasants to borrow in order to find money to pay taxes and buy certain necessities. As security, they mortgaged their future crops to moneylenders in the middleman category. Non-payment of debts could and did lead to their farms being taken away by the moneylenders. The rate of interest on the loans was always fantastically high, amounting to what is known as usury. In East Africa, they were so bad that even the British colonial government had to step in and enact a native credit ordinance to protect Africans from Asian businessmen. Okay? From Asian businessmen. However, in spite of some of these minor clashes between the colonists and the middlemen, the two were part and parcel of the same apparatus of exploitation. On the whole, the Lebanese and Indians did the smaller jobs which Europeans could not be bothered with. They owned things such as cotton ginneries, which separated the seeds from the lint, while, of course, Europeans concentrated on the cotton mills in Europe. The middlemen also went on to out to the villages, while Europeans liked to stay in towns. In the villages, the Indian and Lebanese took over virtually all buying and selling, channeling most of the profits back to Europeans in the towns and those overseas. The share of profits that went to the middleman was insignificant in comparison to the profits reaped by the big European business interests and by the European government themselves. The capitalist institution which came into most direct contact with African peasants was the colonial trading company, that is to say, a company specializing in moving goods to and from the colonies. The most notorious were the French concerns Campagne, Francois, and African Occidentalist and Société Commerciale Ouest Africaine. And the British controlled United African Company. They were responsible for expatriating a great proportion of Africa's wealth produced by peasant toil. Several of the colonial trading companies already had African blood on their hands for participation in the slave trade. Thus, after French merchants in Bordeaux made fortunes from the European slave trade, they transferred the capital to the trade in groundnuts from Senegal and Gambia in the middle of the 19th century. The firms concerned continued to operate in the colonial period, although they changed hands and there was a lot of mergers. Senegal, Mauritania, Mali, the names of Morel and Pram, Morel brothers Buhan and Tyrese, Delmas and Castre were all well known. Several of them were eventually incorporated into SCOA, which was dominated by a consortium of French and Swiss financiers. A parallel process in the French port of Marseille led to the transfer of slave trading capital into the direct trade between Africa and France. After the end of the First World War, most of the small Marseille farms were Marcellus farms were absorbed into the massive CFO, which imported into French West Africa whatever European goods the market would take, and exported in turn the agricultural product that was largely the consequence of peasant labor. CFAO also had British and Dutch capital, and its activities extended into Liberia and into the British and Belgian colonies. It is said that SCOA and CFAO made a profit of up to 90% in good years and 25% in bad years. Ooh, damn, 90%. That's good. But of course, like, what does he mean profit? What do you mean profit? You know? Like a profit from based off their investment? Like, what is the profit? In Britain, like these are just random numbers. Like, you guys see that, right? These are just random numbers. 90% of what? You know? If you're saying the year's expenses, like, what are you saying? Anyway, so in Britain, the notorious slave trading ports of Liverpool was the first to switch to palm oil early in the 19th century, when the trade in slaves became difficult or impossible. This meant the Liverpool folk were no longer exploiting Africa by removing its labor physically to another part of the world. Instead, they were exploiting the labor and raw materials to Africa inside Africa. In the 19th century and right into the colonial era, Liverpool concentrated largely on importing African peasant produce. Backed by the industrial districts of Manchester and Cheshire, this British port was in control of a great proportion of Britain's and Europe's trade with Africa in the colonial period, as it had done in the slave trading period. Glasgow had also had a keen interest in the colonial trade, so did the merchants and big business interests of London. By 1929, London replaced Liverpool as chief port dealing with African import-export. So again, you know, what comes to mind for me is, okay, what's the alternative? Right? Let's say you say, hey, you know what? Liverpool, do not go to Africa. Okay, so what happens? Now, you might say, well, Africa just kind of deals with itself without white people, which is good, right? Except for if you wanted African products. So there is one population that tells you what to do, and if you did not want any European products, you did not want to deal with any Europeans, what should you do, right? And that's those people, I think the Sentinelese, something like that. They just shot the Europeans. They said, look, we don't want any of your shit. Get out. We don't want you. Right? And, you know, there are African groups that used to do this too. okay, in the interior of Africa. They used to kill white people on sight. That's it. They got no trading goods. They got nothing. The trouble is this. I think that some of these people, a lot of us, we like European goods. We like them. And so now the question is, how do you get them? Well, this is how you get them. You know, for every joy, there's a price to be paid. And this is the price, unfortunately. You know? Let's see. We got Ua Abuntum. He says Jamrock Independence Day. So peace to Ua Abuntum. Yeah. So, yeah. So, all right. So this is, as indicated, UASC was the British company which was best known among the commercial concerns. It is a subsidiary of the giant Anglo-Dutch monopoly. Unilever and its agencies were found in all the British colonies of West Africa and on a smaller scale in East Africa. Unilever also controlled the Campagne du Niger François and the Campagne François de la Côte d'Ivoire, SCKN in Chad, Nosoko in Senegal, NSCA in Portuguese Guinea, and John Walker and Co. in Dahomey. And Dahomey is not even like whatever. Certain other British and French firms were not found in every colony, but they did well in the particular area in which they were entrenched. For example, there was John Holt in Nigeria. In East Africa, the import-export business tended to have smaller firms than in West Africa. But even so, there were 5 or 6 which were much larger than the rest and appropriated the largest amounts. One of the oldest was Smith Mackenzie, which was an offshoot of the Scottish company of Mackinnon and Mackenzie, which had spearheaded British colonization in East Africa, and which also had interest in India. Other notable commercial firms were those of A. Brahmin, Wigglesworth and Company, Dalgetty, Leslie and Anderson, Raleigh Bros, Michael Katz, Johansson, the African Mercantile, and Twenshay Overseas Trading. Some of them amalgamated before colonial rule was over, and they all had several other subsidiaries, as well as themselves being related to the bigger companies in the metropole. The UAC also had a slice of the West African import trade, having brought up the firms of Gailey and Roberts, which was started by white settlers in 1904. Right? The pattern of appropriation of surplus in East Africa was easy to follow, in that they were centralization of the extractive mechanisms in Nairobi and parts of Mombasa. All of the big firms operated from Nairobi, with important emphasis in Mombasa to deal with warehousing, shipping, insuring. Uganda and Tanganyika were then brought into the picture via the capital cities of Kampala and Dar es Salaam, where the big firms had branches. Now, you have to pay attention to this. Right? What is Nairobi? What is Kampala? What is Dar es Salaam? These are the capitals. Well, I don't actually know the capital of Kenya. I think it's Nairobi. But the thing is that sometimes they change it. But like the major cities in Africa or in East Africa are Kampala, Nairobi, and Tanganyika. Maybe even Mombasa, right? I've heard of Mombasa, right? But I think Nairobi is the capital of Kenya. I'm not 100% sure. Yeah. So it's Kenya's capital city, right? These white people built these freaking cities. You understand? Like we just kind of gloss over that. You know, recently Kenya moved its capital from Dar es Salaam to another. I can't remember the name of it, but and I kind of want to visit it. But they moved the city. They moved the capital. But like, yeah, like you have to understand that in this colonial process, these other people came in and built these cities, and now we go and live among their cities and say, why don't we have everything? And it's like, look, we probably couldn't have built everything they built because we don't have the capital they have. In some respects, now maybe we could build everything they built, but the reality is that right now we're not building stuff to the point where one because the thing is this, I would have said, hey, look, forget Dar es Salaam, let's go build somewhere else. Anyway, so up until the start of the last war, the volume of trade from East Africa was fairly small, but it jumped rapidly after that. For instance, the value of Kenya's imports rose from £4 million in 1938 to £34 million in 1950 and $70 million in 1960. The value of export was, of course, rising at the same time, and the commercial firms, and you see the value of imports were among the principal beneficiaries of the growth in foreign trade. Trading Yeah, commercial firms, yeah. Trading companies also made huge fortunes on relatively small investments in those parts of Africa where peasant cash crop farming was widespread. The companies did not have to spend a penny to grow agricultural raw materials. Every peasants went into it in for cash crop farming for many reasons. I mean, look. I'm not capping. I don't even gotta read the book. I don't even have to read the book to tell you what was happening in this point in time. But we're just glossing over the facts. A minority, and he's going to say a minority, eagerly took up the opportunity to acquire European goods, which they had become accustomed to during the pre-colonial period. Before we were colonized, we were like, yo, you know what? How can we get your stuff? If you want to get this white boy stuff, if you want him to bring you something, it's like delivery. It's like Grubhub. I was telling his sister, I was like, you could get I'm not gonna say. All right, let's say I say you get Pizza Hut. If you use Grubhub. She's like, no, Pizza Hut doesn't deliver. I'm like, yeah, you could get Pizza Hut if you use Grubhub. Only thing is that you're gonna have to pay more. They're gonna charge you more for the pizza. They're gonna charge you for the delivery. They're gonna tell you to give a tip. Other than that, they're gonna charge you a service fee. But the point is, if you want somebody to deliver stuff to you, you have to pay more. It's different if you were in Europe, because like you could have gone to Europe and said, "Look, I want European goods. I'm in Europe. Give me your goods." Okay, you don't have to pay as much. Like I said, if I go to Pizza Hut. I don't eat Pizza Hut like that, but I go to Pizza Hut and be like, "Look, I came to the store. Give me the store price." But instead, what I'm doing is I'm saying, "Hey, look, bring me this stuff," and as soon as you say, "Bring me this stuff," okay, now you're in a negotiation. And now you're going to lose. See, the Sentinel people or what have you, they say, look, I don't give a shit what you have. Oh, you got a cool pocket watch. Cool, bro. Get the fuck out of my country. Oh, you have cell phones that can talk. I don't give a shit. Get out of my country. That's the attitude you're supposed to have. But if you don't have that attitude, if you're the attitude of, man, I wish I could have one of those, well, then you're screwed over. 9 times out of 10. Then you're going to say, oh, wow, we exploited. Many others in every section of the continent took to earning cash because they had to pay various taxes and money or because they were forced to work. And this is true too. They took away your land and all that kind of stuff. Good examples of African literally being forced to grow cash crops by gun and whip were to be found in Tanganyika. And Tanganyika, by the way, is Tanzania, under German rule, in Portuguese colonies, and in French Equatorial Africa and the French Sudan in the 1930s. These facts came more dramatically to the attention of the outside world when Africans resorted to violence. For example, forced cultivation of cotton was a major grievance behind the Maji Maji Wars in Tanganyika. Oh man, I didn't even know that Maji Maji was in Tanganyika. That's crazy. And behind the nationalist revolt in Angola as late as 1960. So I heard about the Maji Maji. What people know about them is that they used to drink some water in order to like they thought that water could protect them from bullets. It was like a Islamic thing. That's pretty cool. Let's see. No more comments, which is cool. So let's see. In every event, there were very few cases where the peasants were wholly dependent on the cash for his actual sustenance. The trading companies took full advantage of that fact, knowing that an African peasant and his family would keep alive by their own food, shambas. The company had no obligation to pay prices sufficient for the maintenance of the peasant and his family. In a way, the companies were simply receiving tribute from a conquered people without even the necessity to trouble themselves as to how the tributary goods were produced. Trading companies also had their own means of transport inside of Africa, such as motor vehicles and lorries, but usually they transferred the burden of transport costs onto the peasant via the Lebanese or Indian middlemen. Those capitalist companies held the African farmer in a double squeeze by controlling the price paid for the crop and by controlling the price of imported goods such as tools, clothing, and bicycles to which peasants aspired. Exactly. You want their tools, you want their clothing, you want their bicycles, but you don't want to go pick it up. Okay? For example, prices of palm product were severely reduced by the UAC and other trading companies in Nigeria in 1929, while the cost of living was rising due to increased charges from imported goods. In 1924, the price for palm oil had been 14 per gallon. This fell to 7 in 1928 and 1/2 in the following year. Although the trading companies received less for every ton of palm oil during the Depression years, their profit margin increased, showing how brazenly surplus was being pounded out of the peasants. In the midst of the suppression of the UAC was showing the handsome profit. The profit in 1934 were 6 million and a dividend of 15% was paid on ordinary shares. In every part of the colonial Africa, the Depression years followed the same pattern. In Sukumulan, Tanganyika, the price of cotton dropped in 1930 from 50 cents to 10 cents per pound. The French colonies were hit a little later because the Depression did not make its impact on the French monetary zone until after 1931. Then prices of Senegalese groundnut were cut by more than half. Coffee and cocoa dropped even further since they were relative luxuries in the European buyer. Again, it can be noted that French firms such as CFAO and SCAOA faced lower prices when they sold the raw materials in Europe, but they never absorbed any losses. Instead, African peasants and workers bore the pressure, even if it meant forced labor. African peasants in French territories were forced to join so-called cooperative societies, which made them grow certain crops like cotton and made them accept whatever price were offered. Hardly had the Depression ended when Europe was at war. Western powers dragged the African people to fight for freedom. The trading firms stepped up the rate of plunder in the name of God and country. On the Gold Coast, they paid $10 per or 10 pounds per ton for coffee beans, as compared to 50 pounds before the war. At the same time, the price of the imported goods doubled or tripled. Many necessities passed beyond the reach of the ordinary man. On the Gold Coast, a piece of cotton print which had sold before the war for 12 was 90 in 1945. In Nigeria, a yard of khaki was 3 in pre-war days, went up to 16. A bundle of iron sheets formerly cost 30 went up to 100. Right? There's your inflation, right? Urban workers were hardest hit by rising prices since they had to purchase everyday necessities with money, and part of their food was imported. Workers' dissatisfaction highlighted the exploitative post-war situation. There were several strikes, and in the Gold Coast, the boycott of imported goods in 1948 is famous as the prelude to self-government under Nkrumah. However, peasants were also restless under low prices and expensive imports. In Uganda, the cotton-growing peasants could stand things no longer. By 1947. They could get their hands on the big British import-export firms, but they could at least deal with the Indian and African middlemen. So they marched against the Indian-owned cotton ginneries and demonstrated outside the palace of the Kabaka, hereditary ruler who once functioned as a British agent in Uganda. To ensure that at all times the profit margin was kept as high as possible, which is they're supposed to do. The trading firms found it convenient to form pools. The pools fixed the prices to be paid to the and so these pools are basically pan-Europeanism. Okay? So basically Pan-Africanism would be the counter to these pools, but instead of doing Pan-Africanism, we're playing around and playing victim. We're saying, these guys can do it, but we won't, right? So the pools fixed the prices to be paid to the African cultivators and kept the prices down to the minimum. In addition, the trading companies spread into several other aspects of the economic life of the colonies in such a way to introduce several straws for the sucking out of surplus. In Morocco, to give one example, the Campagne General de Maroc owned large estates, livestock farms, timber working, mines, fisheries, railways, ports, and power stations. The giants and that's what I'm saying. They owned power stations. What does that mean? There were power stations there, and then they took over them, or they built power stations. The giants like CFAO and the UAC also had their fingers in everything. CFAO's interests ranged from groundnut plantations to shares in the Faber and Frasinet shipping line. The people of Ghana and Nigeria met the UAC everywhere that they turned. They controlled wholesale and retail trade, owned butter factories, sawmills, soap factories, singlet factories, cold storage plants, engineers, and motor repair shops, tugs, coastal boats, etc. Some of these businesses directly exploited African wage labor, while in one way or another, all operations skimmed the cream product produced by peasant efforts in the cash crop sector. Sometimes the firms which purchased agricultural products in Africa were the same concerns which manufactured goods based on those agricultural raw material. For instance, Cadbury and Fry, the two foremost English manufacturers of cocoa and chocolate, were buyers on the West African coast. On East Africa, the tea manufacturing concern both grew and exported tea. Many of the Marseilles, Bordeaux, and Liverpool trading companies were also engaged in manufacturing items such as soap and margarine in their home territories. This applied fully to the UAC, while the powerful Lazier Group processing oils and fats in France had commercial buyers in Africa. However, it is impossible to separate trading operations from industrial ones. The latter presented the final stage in the long process of exploiting labor of African peasants, in some ways the most damaging stage. So what was this about? Like they manufactured goods. Yeah, so anyway. So peasants worked for a large number of hours to produce a given cash crop, and the price of the product was the price of those long hours of labor. Since primary produce from Africa had always received low prices, it follows that the buyers and users of the raw material were engaging in massive exploitation of the peasants. The above generalization can be illustrated with reference to cotton, with one of the most widely encountered cash crops in Africa. The Ugandan farmer grew cotton, which ultimately made its way into the English factory in Lancashire or a British-owned factory in India. The Lancashire factory owner paid his workers as little as possible, but exploitation of the labor was limited by several factors. The exploitation of the labor of the Ugandan peasant was unlimited because of his power in the colonial state, which ensured that Ugandans worked long hours for very little. Besides, the price of the finished cotton shirt was so high that when re-imported to Uganda, cotton in the form of the shirt was beyond the purchasing power of the peasant who grew the cotton. And again, we always see this kind of stuff, but it's like, yeah, okay. Like, what do you expect? Like, what do we expect? You know, if I work on a Tesla, does that mean I should be able to buy a Tesla? Like, I mean, like, if you think it does, that's fine. But, like, it doesn't really add up that just because I work somewhere that I should be able to buy it. You know? Like, let's say I work in the movie theater. Should I be able to, like, what should I be able to buy exactly? You know, should I, well, maybe a ticket to the movie theater is okay, I get it. But, like, should I be able to buy a movie? You know what I'm saying? Should I buy a director? Should I just buy a movie theater? You know? I mean, I get the whole ticket to the movie, which is fine, but it's like, it's also like, I don't think people understand the purpose of business. You know? The purpose of business is not to, like I said, the purpose of business is to exploit people. At the end of the day, Kofi says, good point so far. I appreciate it, bro. Appreciate it. So he says, the difference between the prices of African exports of raw materials and their importance. Yeah, I'm trying to rush through, honestly. The difference between the prices of African exports of raw material and the importation of manufactured goods constitute a form of unequal exchange. But, like, of course it's an unequal exchange. Like, why would it be equal? Throughout the colonial period, this inequality as exchange got worse. Economists refer to the process as one of the deteriorating terms of trade. In 1839, with the same quantity of primary goods, colonies could buy only 60% of manufactured goods, which they brought in the decade 1870 to 1880 before colonial rule. By 1960, the amount of European purchasable by the same quantity of raw material had fallen still further. There was no objective economic law which determined that the primary produce should be worth so little. Indeed, the developed countries sold certain raw materials like timber and wheat at much higher prices than a colony could command. The explanation is that the unequal exchange was forced upon Africa by the political and military supremacy of the colonizers. Yes. Yes. Yeah, if somebody else is militarily supreme to you, they can force you to do things. You know, this brother is on Twitter. He keeps telling me to read this book. I keep forgetting to read it. It's called, like, Might is Right or something like that. And it's like, I don't want to read it because it's so simple and so basic. But it's like, yeah, might is right. It's the same with anything. It's the same with that. Like, it's like I said, I could force my son to get me the remote control. Right? Now, you might say that's not the worst thing in the world. But, like, I could be sitting down right next to the remote control. Like, I'm on a couch, 3-person couch. The remote control's on the other side of the 3-person couch. I'm on the far left. The control's on the far right. My son is in his room, completely, like, I don't know. Let's say, I want to use meters actually. Let's say, because it's New York, so it's not a big house. Well, let's say 11 meters away, right, or something like that, right? He's 11 meters away. Okay, I will say, "Come here, boy." He will come, and I'll say, "Give me the remote control," and he'll give me the remote control. Why can I do that? Because I'm bigger than him. You understand? It's no, oh, well, you know, in all fairness, you're closer. I don't give a shit. I don't want to get up. He doesn't want to get up. So we come to a compromise. He gets up. You know what I'm saying? like, that's a compromise. Anyway, just in the sphere of international relations, unequal treaties were forced upon small states and the dependencies like those in Latin America. Unequal nature of the trade between the metropole and the colonies was emphasized by the concept of the protected market, which meant even in an efficient metropolitan producer could find a guaranteed market in the colony where his class had political control. Furthermore, as in the preceding era of the pre-colonial trade, European manufacturers built up useful sidelines of goods which would have been substandard in their own market, especially in textiles. The European farmer also gained in the same way by selling cheap butter, while the Scandinavian fisherman came into his own throughout the export of salted cod. Africa was not a large market for European products compared to other continents, but both buying prices and selling prices were set by European capitalists. That certainly allowed their manufacturer and trader more easy access to the surplus of wealth produced in Africa than they would have had if Africa were in a position to raise the price of its own exports. Shipping and banking services. Channels for the exploitation of surplus were not exhausted by the trading companies and industrial concerns. The shipping companies, and again, shipping and banking is like a real legit business, a real legit service. So I mean, I already know he's gonna be like, "Ew, these guys are making profit." Shipping, it's real. It's a real service. Like right now, I'm thinking I want to go live in Africa. Right? I have this expensive ass, like I have this big ass TV right now. Right? How do I get this TV in Africa? How? How? How do I get this big ass TV that I like into Africa? I gotta go to a shipper. Or even like this. I'm gonna go to Africa, right? I'm gonna have, I need money. How am I gonna have money while I'm in Africa? Do I just bring it all with me? You know what I mean? Now, the amount, or even if I wanted to bring all my money to Africa, but let's say I'm not doing that right now, but still, right? Let's say now, how much money do I have? Now, obviously, if I only have, $2 on my back, right? Then obviously, I could bring those $2 in my pocket, okay? But let's say if I had more than $2, right? That's, you walking around with that kind of money? Okay, good luck. Okay, good luck. It's a real service. But he's gonna complain about it. And that's the thing that I'm like, the thing I like about socialists is that they just complain about everything. And the world goes, don't break down a fence unless you know why it was put up. Okay, you see a fence in front of you, don't say, why is this fence here? Just break it down. Understand why the fence is there. Why is shipping a service? Because people need to ship goods. What, if I wanted to sell phones in Africa, let's say I built phones in America, I want to sell phones in Africa. You could say, hey, look, man, just bring the phones with you. Sure, if I had 10 phones, I could just bring the phones with me. If I had 10,000 phones, I can't. Or even like you say, I want to sell books. Like this brother sells books in America, right? Like you're gonna see the difference between me, how I sell books, and how he sells books. The way he sells books is he orders 30,000 books. And then he goes out, he stores them in his house or wherever he stores them, puts them in storage, and then he sells them by hand and by feet. Okay? He sells them himself. He orders 30,000 books. So even if you have 30,000 books and they're $3 a piece, he had to put in 90,000 freaking dollars. Okay? He had to put in $90,000 to sell his books. Now, granted, he's selling the book for $10 or $15. So if he can sell, like how long it takes him to sell 30,000 books, he could get, let's say 30,000 books, he could get $300,000 selling the books for $10. And of course, if he already cost him $90,000, so he really won't receive profit until he sells 10,000 books. Either way, my point, and he has to believe in his work. Now me, I haven't sold 30,000 books. That's why I don't do that 30,000 book shit. You know what I'm saying? I haven't sold 30,000 books. So that's another thing. But my point is, yeah, you have to, you have to come to terms with, like, even if you have 30,000 books, where are you going to store it? How are you going to get it to you? How do you get it to your customers if you're not selling it by hand? Those kind of questions. Like these are real concerns for a real economy, but the socialist just looks at it, hey, you're making a profit. Why are you're making money from shipping? Yeah, because people want you to ship shit. If I want to get 30,000 books in my house, somebody needs to ship it to me. You understand? I'm not going to print those in my house. Or even if I did print those in my house, somebody needs to ship a printer to me. Unless I can construct a printer. Even if I could construct a printer, somebody has to ship the ink to me. Like we don't understand the economy at place. Because we're just like, ugh. So anyway, challenge for the exploitation of surplus were not exhausted by the trading companies and industrial concerns. The shipping companies constituted an exploitative channel that cannot be overlooked. The largest shipping companies were those under the flags of the colonizing nations, especially the British. Shippers were virtually a law unto themselves, being very favorably regarded by the home government as earners of super profits, a stimulator of industry and trade, as carriers of mail, and as contributors to the Navy when war came. African parasites had absolutely no control over the freight rates which were charged, and actually paid more than citizens in other lands. The rate for flour from Liverpool to West Africa was 35 per ton, as compared with 7.6, I guess, from Liverpool to New York, roughly equivalent distance. freight. Yeah, yeah, yes. And it's like, yeah, like what do you even? Oh yeah, so all right, so I'll explain partly why. Um, just for people not again, it goes back to supply and demand. Okay, so let's say a ship from Liverpool to New York versus a ship from Liverpool to West Africa, right? Which one do you think is more frequent? You understand? So basically, if you have one person, like if you have one person willing to go between Liverpool and West Africa, and 10 people willing to go from Liverpool to New York, you could charge, you'll be charged less by the 10 people than the one person, because the one person doesn't have too much competition, right? They don't have to compete with another person for how much they want to charge you. Number two, they're not really willing to go on this trip anyway. You see what I'm saying? And carry your shit. Because like, what's the point? If they're getting the 7 rate, right? If they're getting the 7 rate, like it doesn't, like, it wouldn't even make any sense. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's kind of like if like for instance, like, I'll say it this way. Let's say you go on a taxi. In fact, that's what happens in New York. If you're in Manhattan and like you're in Lower Manhattan, a lot of taxi drivers, like, the joke was that they didn't like picking up black people because black people want to drive to Brooklyn, right? Whereas the taxi drivers would rather drive to Upper Manhattan, because if you're driving to Upper Manhattan, you could then pick up somebody in Upper Manhattan and go back to Lower Manhattan pretty easily. You know, no extra fares, no nothing, right? Whereas if you drive to Brooklyn, you're crossing the bridge, you know, you're paying an extra fare, but chances are you're not going to get the big clientele in Brooklyn. So you'll have to drive back to Brooklyn with less money, because not too many people are going to be trying to drive back into Manhattan from Brooklyn. You get what I'm saying? So they might actually charge you more to go to Brooklyn than they would to charge you for the same distance to go somewhere in Manhattan. You know, and of course you might be like, well, it's racism. And that might be part of it. You know? But like, realistically speaking, from an economic standpoint, it would just make a lot more sense to charge people more for undesirable routes. Now, why is this undesirable? You know, you might say, well, racism again, but you might also say, hey, look, like how much are you trading? Like, between Liverpool and New York, what are you? Because New York, if people don't know, New York is like the was like the trading hub of the world. You know, like the trading capital of the world. You know, it's one of those big profitable ventures if you're a pilot. You know, versus, you know, wherever this is in West Africa. But of course, if West Africa, you know, fixed this game, you know, things would change. I hope you guys appreciated this. This is pretty good economics. Although, like I said, it does come up. I might come across a little bit on the Wazungu side, but not really. I'm just like, really, realistically, we have to be like realistic. You know what I mean? Like, we just have to explain the economics as it is, as opposed to as we want it to be. You know, every place is equal. It's like, no, it's not gonna. That's not how it works. That's not how anything works. You know, even if I'm in Tanzania, if I wanted to go from one major city to another major city, like in an Uber, that's possible. But if I wanted to go from a major city to a village, like, they would charge me out the ass. You know what I mean? They'd charge me out the ass. Because they're like, look, when I get to that city, that village, I have to drive back. There's nothing there in the village. Like, even when I was doing the lift or whatever it's called, right? When I was in Tanzania, it was like, I went to Mogoro, which is like a smaller city. It's not Dar es Salaam. And it wasn't even available. Like rideshare apps weren't even available in other cities. Hey, let me hurry up, because eventually I might have to pick up this kid. Alright, so freight rates normally varied with the volume of cargo carried, but the rate for cocoa was established at 50 per ton when amounts exported were small at the beginning of the century. And the same high figure remained when exports increased. Coffee carried from Kenya to New York in the 1950s earned the shippers $40 per ton. Theoretically, it was the merchant who paid the shipper the freight charges, but in practical terms, it meant the peasant production was bearing all the costs, since the merchants paid out of profits made by buying cheaply from the peasants. You see what I'm saying? Oh, technically the merchants, because they... Like, shut up. No disrespect to the ancestors, but still, like, ugh. Alternatively, why, like, you just complain, like, really. What? And I'm just, like, complaining too. Alright, so alternatively, so I think I might, like, only 9 more pages, right? Alternatively, white settler planters paid the cost, as in Kenya, and then regained their profits through exploitation of rural wage labor. Shipping companies retained a high profit margin by a practice similar to the pools of the commercial firms. They established what were known as conference lines, which allowed 2 or more shippers to share the freight loads between themselves on the most favorable basis possible. Their return on investment was so high and their greed so uncontrollable that even the merchants of the colonizing powers protested. From 1929 to 1931, UAC, backed by Unilever, engaged in economic war with the West African Lines Conference, comprising the British shipping firm of Elder Dempster, the Holland West African Line, and the German West African Line. In that instance, the trading monopoly won a victory over the shipping monopoly, but it was a fight between 2 elephants and the grass was trampled all the more. At the end of it all, the African peasants were the greatest losers because both traders and shippers adjusted their difference by lowering prices of primary products as paid to Africans. In the background of the colonial scene hovered the banks, insurance companies, maritime underwriters, and other financial houses. One can say in the background because the peasants never dealt directly with such institutions and was generally ignorant of their exploiting function. The peasants and workers had no access to bank loans because he had no securities or collateral. Banks and financial houses, and that's the thing about life. I want people to understand. Like I don't want to keep stopping, but I want people to understand this economy if we're really trying to become an economic people. I bought a farm. I gave an investment. I gave a quote-unquote loan. I get nothing back, and the person tells me, well, tough luck. The weather sucked. They have no security. They had no collateral. They owe me nothing. I can't collect anything from them. So the bank would just tell me, what kind of a dumbass gives to people without collaterals and securities? But this socialist will tell you what kind of a person doesn't give to people with no securities or collaterals. I already tell you guys, I love this one dude some money a while back. He said, look, man, I'm good for it. Right? I haven't seen any of the money. And it's like, there's no consequence for this dude. You understand? That's just the world you live in. The world is, hey, look, yes, you can give somebody money, and when they collect money from you, you might not get anything back. So have securities, have collateral. But the socialists will tell you, the peasants, like, what the fuck? What do you expect? Oh my gosh. Like, on the one hand, it's good to read this book, but on the other hand, it's like, I don't like socialists. Real talk. You know? Because it's like, they're not connected to reality. And I'm having real experiences where people are going to be like, oh, well, you're just a fucking capitalist, and blah, 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 blah. And it's like, no, stupid. I've given money to peasants and workers, and I've gotten nothing back in return. And I'm not saying that they took it and ran, and they won, although the guy in America probably did. But I'm saying that, what do I get? I just lose. So what's the point? If I could go back in time, I wouldn't give them any money. Well, not just because I lost, but because they lost too. You understand? So they lost and I lost, so it just fucking sucks. It's different if I lost, they won. That's okay. You know what I mean? Like, the point was for them to win. I get that. When we both lose because they mismanage, it sucks. Okay? Because I could have lost my own damn money. Anyway. Banks and finance houses dealt only with other capitalists who could prove to the bankers that whatever happened, the bank would recover its money and make a profit. Like, what's the problem with that? You know, they only worked with people who could prove that they could actually recover their losses. Shit in my damn head, man. Like, I don't get it. Like, I just don't get the social, because people are buying this shit up. Like, oh, look at these people. They only give to people who look at, what? Oh, y'all. I'm gonna use a line from George Bush. Well, not George Bush, really, but like a satire of George Bush. But it's like, it's starting to piss me off, and it's not because you're black either. like, it's starting to piss me off. banks only who could prove to the bankers. I need to actually put this in my profile. I need to put this in my profile because a lot of people ask for money, and it's like this is actually important. I'm gonna highlight this shit. Fuck it. I'm gonna bring this up to a bunch of people. Where's my highlighter? I'm gonna highlight this. Like, cause that's the truth. Anyway, so in the epic of imperialism, the bankers became the aristocrats of the capitalist world. So in another sense, they were very much in the foreground. Like, actually, no, real talk. Even the dressmaker I loaned to, right? I loaned some good. I thought she was good for it, right? Don't see any problem with that either. But I mean, it's okay because, like, again, like, it's not the end of the world. I mean, it was a lot of shillings, but you know, no risk, no reward. All the same, I'm just saying, you know, like, this is the world we live in, man. In the epic of imperialism, the bankers became the aristocrats of the capitalist world. So in another sense, they were very much in the foreground. In the epic of imperialism, the bankers became the aristocrats of the capitalist world. So in another sense, they were very much in the foreground. The amount of surplus produced by African workers and peasants passed into the hands of the metropolitan bankers is quite phenomenal. They registered a return of capital higher even than the mining companies, and each a new direct investment that they made spent further in the alienation of the fruits of African labor. Furthermore, all investment in the colonies were an effective involvement of a big finance monopoly system. Smallest trading companies were ultimately linked with a bigger banker. The returns on colonial investments were consistently higher than those on investments in the metropolis, so the financiers stood to benefit from sponsoring colonial enterprise. Yeah, of course. In the earliest years of colonialism, the banks in Africa were small and relatively independent. This applied to the Banque de Senegal, started as early as 1853, and the Bank of British West Africa, which began as the offshoot of the shipping firm of Elton Dempster. However, the great banking houses of Europe, which carried on remote control of development ever since the 1880s, soon moved in directions of the colonial banking scene, where the volume of capitalist transactions made theirs worthwhile. The Banque de Senegal emerged into the Banque de l'Afrique Occidentale in 1901, acquiring links with the powerful Bank of Indochina, which in turn was a special creation of several powerful metropolitan French bankers. In 1924, the Banque emerged in the French territories, linked with the Credit Lyonnais on the BNCI in France. By that time, the Bank of British West Africa had its finance banked by Lloyd's Bank. That's the y'all see me. I said Lloyd Banks. Y'all know that's the 50 cents, entourage. Westminster Bank, the Standard Bank, and the National Provincial Bank, all in England. The other great English banking firm, Barclays, Barclays Center, moved directly into Africa, purchased a colonial bank, and set it up as Barclays DCO. So again, you should be setting up banks in Africa. Not complaining about white people setting up banks in Africa. You should be setting up banks in Africa. Because African people need capital. But you're going to quickly find out when you're loaning people capital that some people are not good for it. But, I'll leave that for you to discover. Or I'll leave you to not set up banks. And then complain about other people setting up banks like people don't need capital. Anyway, let's see. My brother Controversy just put out a podcast called Pseudo Niger Congo. Shout out to my brother. Let's see what everybody's saying. Nobody has saying anything. Okay. Let's keep going. So, the Bank of British West Africa, which became the Bank of West Africa in 1957 in Barclays, held between them the lion's share of the banking business of British West Africa, just as French West and Equatorial Africa were shared out between the BAO and the BCA. These were the Union of French and British Banking Capital in West Africa in 1949 and the formation of the British and French West Africa Bank. French and Belgian exploitation also overlapped in the financial sphere, since the Societe Generale had both Belgian and French capital. It supported banks in French Africa and the Congo. Other weaker colonial powers were served by the international banks, such as Barclays, as well as using the colonial territories as grazing grounds for their own national bank. In Libya, the Banco de Roma and the Banco de Napoli operated, while in Portuguese territories, the most familiar name was that of the Banco Ultramarino. In Southern Africa, the outstanding bank. And another thing to realize is this. Sorry, I should really point this out. When we talk about French Africa and the Congo and West Africa and all that kind of stuff, the thing we're not really picking up on is that when they set up a colony, it's their colony. You understand? It's their colony. See, we're looking at it like, yo, French, that's our stuff. It's our country, right? But like, Whose country is America? Is it the Native American or the white American? And once you realize it's the white Americans, you realize that the colony goes to the colonizer, not the indigenous people. I'll just leave it at that. Now, if you say, hey, look, actually America is the Native Americans, that's different. If you believe that, that's fine. But you don't believe that. You don't. You don't believe Brazil is for the Native Americans there, but the Brazilian usurpers, or what have you. Well, actually, I don't know about Brazil so much, but I think a lot of them are mixed or whatever. But still, my point is that you understand colonization changes who makes the profit. But like I said in the beginning, overclass and underclass. But it is what it is. Let's keep going. In Southern Africa, the outstanding. We're gonna try to go 6 more pages. We're gonna try to do page 30 of 89. So in Southern Africa, the outstanding banking firm was the Standard Bank of South Africa (Ltd), started in 1862 in the Cape Colony by the head of business houses having close connections with London. Its headquarters were placed in London, and it's made a fortune out of financing gold and diamond strikes. And through handling the loot of Cecil Rhodes and De Beers by 1895, the Standard Bank spread into Bechuanaland, Rhodesia, and Mozambique, and it was the second British bank to be established in the British East Africa. The actual scale of profits was quite formidable. In a book officially sponsored by the Standard Bank, the writer modestly concluded as follows: little attention has been paid in the text of this book to the financial outcomes of the Standard Bank's activity. The profitability was an inevitable outcome of survival and was therefore bound to be a primary objective from first to last. In 1960, the Standard Bank produced a net profit of I don't even know what this number is. It looks like there's an extra zero. But yeah, 1,181,000. Well, there's an extra zero, so it's really 11 million, but they put a comma over here, so it's kind of, and paid a 40% dividend to its shareholders. Woo, 14% dividend. Woo. Anyway, most of the latter were in Europe or elsewhere white South Africans, while the profit was produced mainly by black people of South and East Africa. The profit of what? The bank? Furthermore, European banks transferred the reserves of their African branches to the London head office to be invested in London money markets. This was the way in which most rapidly expatriated African surplus to much opposed. The first bank to be set up in East Africa in the 1890s was an offshoot of the British Bank operating in India. It later came to be called the National in Grinsley. In neighboring Tanganyika, the Germans established a German East African Bank in 1905, but after the First World War, the British had a near monopoly of the East African banking. Altogether, 9 foreign banks were in existence in East Africa during the colonial period, out of which the big 3 were National in Grinsley, the Standard Bank, and Barclays. The East Africa. Oh, let me see. I gotta. Hold on a second. I need to get a. Let me see something. Hold on a second. Let me just write. Alright, so East Africa provides an interesting example of how effectively foreign banks serve to dispossess Africa of its wealth. Most of the banking and other financial services were rendered to white settlers whose conception of home was Britain. Consequently, when the white settlers felt threatened toward the end of the colonial period, they rushed to send their money home to Britain. For example, when the decision to concede self-government of Kenya was taken by the British in 1960, and you hear the difference between my voice when I sit up. Hey, a sum of shillings 40 million was immediately transferred to safety in London by whites in Tanganyika. That sum, like all of the remittances by colonial banks, represented the exploitation of African land, resource, labor. Yeah, okay. Everything is exploitation for these guys. The colonial administration, and I'm not saying it isn't, but I'm just saying, like, come on. The colonial administration, like everything, it's like, yo man, the way how the bank makes money. It's like, how's the bank? Colonial administration as economic exploiter. In addition to private companies, the colonial state also engaged directly in the economic exploitation and empowerment of Africa. The equivalent of the colonial office in each colonizing country worked hand in hand with the governors in Africa to carry out a number of functions. Principal ones being as follows: to protect national interests against competition from other capitalists, to arbitrate the conflicts between their own capitalists, to guarantee optimal conditions under which private companies could exploit Africa. So the colonial administration, The last mentioned objective was the most crucial. This is why colonial governments were repeatedly speaking about the maintenance of law and order, in which they meant the maintenance of conditions most favorable to the expansion of capitalism and the plunder of Africa. This led to the colonial governments to impose taxes. One of the main purposes of the colonial tax system was to provide requisite funds for administering the colony as a field of exploitation. European colonizers ensured that Africans paid for the upkeep of the governors and police who oppressed them and served as watchdogs for private capitalists. In Indeed, taxes and custom duties were levied in the 19th century with the aim of allowing the colonial powers to recover the cost of armed forces which they dispatched to conquer Africa. In effect, therefore, the colonial governments never put a penny into the colonies. All expenses were met by exploiting the labor and natural resources of the continent, and for all the practical purposes, the expense of maintaining the colonial government machinery was a form of alienation of the product of African labor. The French colonies were especially victimized in this respect, particularly since 1921. The local revenue raised from taxation had to meet all expenses as well as to build up reserves. Yeah, but like I said, we're not gonna win as a people if we don't understand why this is. I feel like we get it. Who are listening to me, but I feel like we don't get it collectively. You know, if the French colonies did not profit the French, they would not have colonies. Okay, now granted, you may think that's a good thing, but the French are looking for a way to expand their profits. Okay, and you might not think that's a good thing, but you're not French, so who cares? You know, a lot of times we look at foreigners and we say they're only in it for themselves. No shit, Imhotep. I don't want to disrespect the ancestors, but like, of course they're in it for themselves. You're on this earth. One of the things you should do is try to be in it for yourself. And that's the thing that we always critique people. We're like, oh man, these Russians, but you know, the Russians probably have some terms. Yeah. The Chinese probably have some terms. Yeah. The Americans probably have some terms. Yeah. The French probably have some. Yes. Everybody has terms, except for you. And that's the problem. You know, let me go back into the American election. But you guys go for the Democrats or the Republicans with no damn terms. I'm going to vote for you. Out of the goodness of my heart. Okay. Thank you. Have a nice day. I'll see you in 4 years. That's what they say they say this every 4 years. They tell you, thank you. I'll see you in another 4 years. Because you don't come in no terms. And then you critique, man, well, be careful because, the Russians might have an ulterior motive. Yeah, profit. You know what I'm saying? Everybody. Having set up the police, army, civil service, and judiciary on African soil, the colonizing powers were then in a position to intervene much more directly in the economic life of the people than they had been the case previously. One major problem in Africa from the capitalist viewpoint was how to induce Africans to become laborers or cash crop farmers. In some areas, and of course they took the land from you. In such areas as West Africa, Africans become so attached to European manufacturers during the early periods of trade that on their own initiative they were prepared to go to great lengths to participate in the colonial money economy. Look at this shit! You were coded! You were coded! I nobody talks about this, but you were coded. You say to yourself, man, how could white people come to your neighborhood and get you to sell drugs? How could they come to your neighborhood and get you to sell drugs to your aunt? Get your aunt on cocaine. How could they do that? Well, I wanted the PS3. I want to play Grand Theft Auto. I wanted to watch Barbie. I wanted to watch Oppenheimer. That's how it was. You could sugarcoat it, but that's how it was. Let's see something. Okay, I think my mic. I think Better Medicine says sometimes you're far from the mic and not speaking into it. Yeah, I have the mic sitting down next to me. I didn't want to hold it the entire time. Let me see if I can. Well, just now I was laying down, kind of next to it, because it's just these podcasts they're pretty long, So you just gotta recline. I used to stand up and hold the mic, but I started getting rid of some stuff because I'm just I'm not even gonna be in this country. You know what I mean? I don't even want to be in this country, so why am I collecting a bunch of shit for? So I used to stand up every podcast, but now I'm just kind of this thing is in the way. You know what I mean? My house should not have I should be minimalist while I'm in America. But anyway, but that was not the universal response. In many instances, Africans did not consider the monetary incentives great enough to justify changing their way of life so as to become laborers or cash crop farmers. In such cases, the colonial state intervened to use law, taxation, and outright force to make Africans pursue a line favorable to capitalist profits. Yeah, they took the land. When colonial governments seized African lands, they achieved two things simultaneously. They satisfied their own citizens who wanted mining concessions or farming land, and they created the conditions whereby landless Africans, that's what I'm saying, when you're landless, that's when you're screwed, had to work not just to pay taxes, but also to survive. In settler areas such as Kenya and Rhodesia, the colonial government also prevented Africans from growing cash crops so that their labor would be available directly for the whites. One of the Kenyan white settlers, Colonel Grogan, put it bluntly when he said of the Kikuyu, "We have stolen his land, now you must steal his limbs. Compulsory labor is the corollary of our occupation of the country." Yup. This guy just says it. Just tell like it is. In those parts of the continent where land was still in African hands, colonial governments forced Africans to produce cash crop no matter how low the prices were. The favorite technique was taxation. Money taxes were introduced on numerous items: cattle, land, houses, and the people themselves. Money to buy taxes was got by growing cash crops. So this is actually the last page. Well, one of the last two pages. But we'll see how much more of this 5.1 is left. Or working on European farms or their mines. An interesting example of what colonialism was all about was provided in French Equatorial Africa, where French officials banned the Maja people, now in Congo, Brazil, from hunting, so they would engage solely in cotton cultivation. The French enforced the ban, although there was a little livestock in the area, and hunting was the main source of meat in the people's diet. Finally, when all else failed, colonial powers resorted widely to the physical coercion of labor, backed on by, of course, by legal sanctions, since anything which the colonial government chose to do was legal. And that's how it is. Laws are made by the rulers. And laws and bylaws with presence in British East Africa were required to maintain minimum acreages of cash crops like cotton and groundnuts were effective forms of coercion by the colonial state, although they are not normally considered under the heading of forced labor. The simplest form of forced labor was that which colonial governments exacted to carry out public works. Labor for a given number of days per year had to be given free for those public works: building castles for governors, prisons for Africans, barracks for troops, and bungalows for colonial officials. A great deal of this forced labor went into the construction of roads, railways, and ports, provide the infrastructure for private capitalist investment, and to facilitate the export of cash crops. Taking only one example from the British colony of Sierra Leone, one finds the railway, which started at the end of the 19th century, required forced labor from thousands of peasants. Driven from the villages, the hard work and appalling conditions led to the death of a large number of those engaged in work on the railway. In the British territories, this kind of forced labor, including juvenile labor, was widespread enough to call forth in 1923 a native authority ordinance restricting the use of compulsory labor for portages, railways, and road buildings. More often than not, means were found of circumventing the legislation. An international forced labor convention was signed by all colonial powers in 1930, but again, it was flouted in practice. So, okay, let's just see how much more of this chapter is there. So it's too many more pages, so I can't continue. Well, basically, we're gonna stop here. We read a third of it. Let me see. I don't think it even ends. Yeah. So it looks like okay. So it goes up to. This will be 5.2, but it goes to it goes halfway. This is pretty good. Well, not half, but like almost half. But I don't want to spend all day reading. And this was a nice this is a nice amount. So we're gonna stop at page 30. Oh, this is like a nice break. Is this a nice break? Where is it? No, I didn't see it. So sometimes you want to just break at a nice place. This is not a good break that we're doing, but it's fine. You know what I mean? Because like we all have to go about our lives, type thing. So we're gonna stop at page 30 of 89, which is again, it's like a third of the way, right? I'm gonna just leave a highlighter just to say, hey, look, you didn't read this. You know, and I'm not even gonna read it, so I don't even remember it. We're gonna save, and we're just gonna leave it at that. So that's actually pretty much the podcast. If anybody has any comments or questions, now would be the time to field them. But other than that, you know, I appreciate everybody for coming through. Shout out to everybody who's here. Matron was here. Kofi is here. We have Consider Cheek, obviously. Bit of Medicine podcast. Mr. IC3 Black, Reparations Nation. Mr. Tekken himself. And of course, Ua Buntum. So appreciate everybody for coming through. What can I say? Oh yeah, so I wrote that chapter. I'm gonna probably continue writing my book. But like I like the first sentence. I don't know about the other sentences. But all right, so Kofi says no questions or comments. So that's pretty much it. So anybody else? So all right, so that's the whole podcast. Thank you everybody for coming through. Have a nice week, and hopefully we'll see each other. We'll continue next week. So Shemim Hotep, Uncle Jas and Neb Neb, Amin, Ma'at, Dua Nature.